Welcome back, and thank you for coming to this video. It'll probably be my last installment, considering the times that we're in. I've decided to do a video that brings together all the bits and pieces that I've come to understand over the last, well, let's say about 10 years, but probably more intensely in the last 7 years, with regards to the time of the end, the time of tribulation, and the events that will bring us into that time of tribulation. The appointment of the worker groups, the escape of the bride, and then of course the beginning of tribulation, the Third World War, the Red Horse Rider, etc., and all the events of Revelations. So this video is not intended to be an all-inclusive, detailed video of these events, but rather to just spend a bit of time and bring together the various studies that I've done over the last few years. Some of them have required a bit of revision over time, and I think we're pretty much there. And there might still be a few changes here and there, but by and large, I think I've got a clear understanding of the sequence of events that are about to take place, about to unfold. And this video will be really a conclusion of the last couple of videos, in particular with regards to Ezekiel's warning, with regards to John and his true birth date and the significance of his birth date. So I was deliberating whether to actually do this video or not, and I actually decided not to do it. But because of the question of one person that reached out to me, that I answered very briefly with regards to the subject matter that I'm going to be discussing in this video, I decided that I will do the recording. I'll record this video, especially for those that have taken the time to hear what I have to say, especially for my loved ones, my sons, my friends, my family, and all the brothers and sisters in Christ that I've worked with over the last couple of years in these studies. What I'm about to share is probably may be regarded a bit controversial by some of the people that I've studied with, because it is a little bit different to some of the conclusions that we've come to in the past. And I do believe that the wrapping up of these bits and pieces was deliberately kept to this point in time, to this time literally days away from the appointment of the worker group and the beginning of the preparation for the taking of the bride. Many are of the view, and I included, that we are about to see things happening within the next couple of days, probably from around about the 6th of February, and or at least within a week of the 6th of February, we should start seeing some things happening, and these things will probably not be visible to the most of the people around the world. Those that are watching, those that are diligently seeking the Lord, will no doubt be aware of these things that will begin to happen. But by and large, the majority of the world will be unaware, and even some of the bride, I do believe, will be unaware. And you may be wondering why I'm including the bride in being unaware, because there is an understanding that the bride is taken at this point in time. But what I want to show in this video, that I believe that we've actually that is not exactly the case. I think we're going to be seeing the commissioning of the worker group, and then with the taking of the bride according to the feast days, the first fruits of the wheat harvest is the bride. And so this video, I want to try and bring in all the bits and pieces that I've come to understand over the time. And I've always tried to build my studies on the Word of God, on the Scriptures. I don't want to stand before the Lord and say an answer to having invented something of my own mind. Yes, sometimes we don't see it clearly, and we might see it from the wrong angle, or we may misinterpret, and that may be the case in this instance as well, in my understanding. And if that is the case, well, I pray and I trust that the Lord will set the matter straight. I do, however, believe that I do have the correct understanding of the sequence of events, and we'll see if this is indeed the case. And if that is the case, well, then this video may well be very helpful to a lot of people, to my family and friends, to my brothers and sisters who need it. to be able to iron out some of the events that they might be seeing and may not recognize them in full, or may be uncertain as to what exactly is going on. So I have quite a lot to share on this video, and I'm going to try and keep it as a reasonable length, as short as possible, but it's going to be a long video. And there's also a clip that I want to share that I came across recently, and I really believe that they nailed on the head with regards to the singing of a new song, and with regards to the 144,000. They don't have the complete understanding, but there is some understanding that was in line with my understanding, but they also enhanced what I saw, but I couldn't quite describe it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I couldn't quite get to the point or I couldn't quite get to elaborate as to why this new song and the singing of the new song was as important as what I thought it was. And I think that you'll see that it is quite a significant thing, and we should have been taking note of it more carefully. Anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to get started with this was a study that I did some time ago, and this is with regards to the bridal. What I referred to then at that time was the bridal party. I came to understand some time ago that the first group that is taken. And sorry, maybe I should just say this. If you're watching this video and you don't have an understanding of the tribulation being 14 years, if you don't have an understanding of who the Gospels are speaking to, in other words, Luke speaking to the bridal party, Mark speaking to those that will be left behind, the sleeping church, those that will go through the first half of the tribulation, the first 7 years of seals, and then of course Matthew speaks to Judah, who will go through, and their time of testing and Jacob's trouble will be during the time of trumpets. And John speaks to the worker group. So if you don't have an understanding of that in particular, that would be a foundational understanding to really grasp what I'm going to be sharing with you in this video. And there's just absolutely no way that I can cover all of that in this video as well. So if you're at that point, I'd recommend that the best source of that information would be Ministry Revealed, either their website, Ministry Revealed's website, or a good source of information would be the book that was written. I've got it in my list on my drive. I have a drive that a folder in my Google Drive that I've called a 14ers study bundle, and in this I've all the studies that I'll be referring to in this video and more are all in this folder, in this directory. And in this directory is also the book that was published by Ministry Revealed to Alan. So I just want to see it. That is here. There it is. Yeah. Ministry Revealed, the End Times Revealed. So this is a PDF book that you can download and read to get that understanding, the foundational understanding that you would require to understand what I'm about to share with you now. We will see that there is in fact a pre-tribulation rapture, there's a mid-tribulation rapture, and then the Lord returns for his millennial reign. Now, this first group, the pre-tribulation group, I've come to the understanding that it is not just one homogeneous group, but that it comprises of three parts. And what I like to refer to as the bridal party. In this study, I went into a fair amount of detail in providing the scriptural evidence of these three groups, and it's largely in the book of Luke, where the Lord speaks about him coming in his glory, in the Father's glory, and the glory of the angels. But only in Luke does he speak about these three glories. In the book of Mark and Matthew, he speaks about only one glory. So if we have a look at that, we'll see that in Luke 9:26, Jesus said, "For whoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he come in his own glory, in his Father's, and of the holy angels." So there's three separate glories there. As compared to Mark 8:38, it's a comparison. It's a comparative it's the equivalent of the Luke 29:26 verse. But in Mark 8:38, he says, "Whoever shall be ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed, when he cometh in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So there's two things that we can see that are very different here. One, he refers to this group as an adulterous and sinful generation, which is something that he doesn't refer to the Luke group as. And the second thing is he says he's going to come in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So that's one glory. And then in Matthew 16:27, which is also the equivalent, the complementary verse of Mark 8 and Luke 9, we see that for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. So again, we see two differences here. One, he refers to one glory, the glory of his Father, and we also see there that he's wrapping up things. This is the end of the tribulation, where where the rewards are handed out at the end of the tribulation. So this is an end time. This is the final event of the three. The order of these events would be Luke, Mark, and Matthew, where Luke has got three parts to the group, Mark has one part of the group which related to the Father, and Matthew has one group which related to the glory of the Father. But in Luke, we've got a group related to the glory of the Father, but two other groups, one related to the glory of Jesus and the other to the glory of the angels. So we see here that in the three events, the pre-trib group comprises of three parts, whereas the mid-trib group and the return group has one part. And we see this pattern when we have this understanding. We go along with this understanding, we start to read other passages in the Word, and we start to unravel the end time understanding. And we bear this in mind. We'll find that things fall far more easily in place with regards to the descriptions that are provided for us elsewhere. And we'll see some more of that in the remainder of this video. So the first part I really wanted to just show is this study, which I will make available in the description box. In fact, what I'll do is I'll put a link to the folder, so that not only are all the studies that I refer to in this video be available there, those that are interested will have access to the rest of the studies also. Some of them do require a little bit of updating, and I will mention some of the revisions that haven't been done yet, but some of the new thinking that has come to the fore of late. And I just haven't got around to revising some of these studies according to the latest thinking. And but I'll try to mention some of the main points in the course of this video. So we see that the bridal party comprises of three parts, and I believe that the three parts would be the worker group, also referred to as the friend of Christ, or the bride, the working bride, and that working group may well even comprise of two parts as well. John the Baptist was related to the worker group that was the friend of Christ. We see that in John 3:29. We see that John makes the following statement in 9:29. He says, this was after John was being questioned with regards to Jesus also baptizing, and with his group of disciples, and John was baptizing with his group of disciples, and there were some questions as to the difference, and John really clarifies the matter, and let's start with 3:28. He says, "Ye yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but that I am sent before him. He that hath the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom," referring to himself, "which standeth and heareth him, rejoiceth greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. This, my joy, therefore, is fulfilled. He must increase and I must decrease." So this is John putting forward Jesus above himself. But the important thing is he refers to himself as the friend of the groom. He was a witness. He comes before, preparing the way. We know that Jesus referred to him as the Elijah of his time, the voice in the wilderness. Even though nobody recognized him as Elijah at that point, they knew that Elijah comes before Christ. We have that story in the Transfiguration, Luke 9. After the Transfiguration story, Jesus spoke of his death and resurrection, and they said, "But isn't Elijah supposed to come first?" And Jesus said, "Well, indeed Elijah hath come, and they've done unto him as they pleased." And he made that connection to John. So we see that John the Baptist is connected to Elijah. We will also see the importance of this connection in the Transfiguration story, where we've got Moses and Elijah in the Transfiguration story. Okay, the Transfiguration story is related to the worker group. But the first thing we need to know as part of the worker group is that they are connected to, they are recognized as the friend of the groom. The other part of the group is what I like to refer to as the bride. So the worker group, we've got the friend, and we've got the worker bride, or what I believe to be the Hebrew bride, the Hebrew worker bride that'll be working through the time of seals with the Lord Jesus in the bringing in of the harvest. That she is also a bride. So the one part of this bridal party is that this one part of this worker group is the Hebrew bride, with whom a covenant will be made, a marriage covenant will be made at the beginning, at the commissioning of that worker group. A marriage covenant will be made with that Hebrew bride, but the marriage will actually only take place 14 years later at the end of the tribulation. It was customary in ancient times for when a daughter and a son were born. At times, parents would enter into a marriage agreement, a marriage covenant, that they were to be married when they come of age. And their coming of age would have been when at about 14 years of age. So we see that type and shadow here. We see that there will be an entering into a covenant with this worker group bride, and then but the marriage, the supper of the Lamb, will only take place for this bride, the Hebrew bride, at the end of the tribulation, at the time of the Jubilee. So that's the first part of the group. The second part of the group is what I refer to as the Gentile bride. And the Gentile bride is that the one that's referred to by Hosea, where he will call those that were not his people, he will call his beloved. So she who was not his beloved, he will call her his beloved. He takes out of the nations a Gentile bride. And this will be the fulfillment now of that promise, that mystery that Paul spoke about. Paul, we know, and we'll touch on some of the verses later. He was the apostle to the Gentiles, and his task was prepare a Gentile bride to present before the Lord Jesus Christ, before the Messiah. Now that's the second part of this bridal party. The third part of this bridal party is what I call the accounted worthy group. So the accounted worthy group is separate from the Gentile bride, but a group not a bride and not a worker, but accounted worthy to escape all these things. This is as referred to in Luke 21:36, that group that will escape the tribulation, escape the entire tribulation, will be taken before the beginning of the tribulation, together with the bride. And of course the worker group, who are part of the group, will remain behind on earth to do work through the time of seals, and maybe even some of them will work through into the time of trumpets. So we see that three-part group, and that's what I cover in a greater detail in that particular study, Flight 717. So have a look at that. Now I want to get into the timing aspects. Now that we understand those three groups, the question now is, are all three groups taken simultaneously, or are they taken at different times? And by and large, the thinking to date has been that they'll be all taken simultaneously at the same time, and that event will take place very likely in the next couple of days, around about the 6th of February, which would be in line with the birth date of John the Baptist. Now, in my previous video that I did, I went into some great detail on John the Baptist and how we know when John was born, and the significance of John's birth in the prophecy that Zechariah, his father, prophesied at his 8th day's circumcision. So we also know that the book of Luke, the first 4 chapters really give us the three main events through the tribulation in the first 4 chapters in order. Now this I've learned from Alan, and I've learned many things from Alan at Ministry Revealed, and I agree with much of what he's taught. And this one aspect that I can see clearly is that Luke chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 give us the following steps with regards to the tribulation. Chapter 1, which is largely about John's birth, conception, and his birth and his circumcision, is connected to the taking of the worker group. Luke chapter 2, which is about the birth of Jesus Christ in his 40 days to his dedication and the offering at the temple, and where he was brought to the temple at 40 days, is connected to the taking of the bride and and those accounted worthy. it's also speaking about the 40 days of the, it gives us a timing with regards to the 40 days of the Son of Man. The warning that he spoke of, that Jesus said that he would be a warning as Jonah was a warning to the Ninevites, to Nineveh, so the Son of Man will be a warning to this generation. Of course, they will reject his warning, they'll reject him, and they will not, unlike the Ninevites who repented, this generation will reject him and they will not repent. But he nevertheless will come and deliver a 40-day warning. That will be about the same time as his original 40 days after his birth. So in order to understand the time, we need to understand when Jesus was born. Now, I've covered that in detail in this video. Sorry, I didn't cover that in detail in this video. But I have done a study that I refer to as "Unto Us a Child is Born." This study gives scriptural detail as to how we can determine exactly when John was born, which day, which would have been around the middle of the 11th month. We can, regardless of whether the year was a 13th month year or a 12-month year, we can know with a great degree of certainty that John was born in the middle of the 11th month, probably in the first week of the 11th month. So in the 11th month, the end of, in this study, I'm not going to go into it in detail, please read through it, but it brings us to here around about the 8th of the 11th month, and that will be in this year, that will be the 6th of February. So that's John's birth, and we can also know that from that, we can determine exactly when Jesus was born, and assuming that all evidence is that the year that John was born in was a 13-month year, which brings us to a birth for Jesus Christ in the middle of the 3rd month, which is Feast of Weeks. It is Covenant Day. It is most fitting that Jesus would have been born in the middle of the 3rd month, as we know from the Apocryphas that Isaac, the type and shadow of Jesus, the son of Abraham, the son that Abraham had to potentially sacrifice, it was his test of faith, and Isaac was that promised child of promise, just as Jesus is that child of promise. And so Isaac is a type and shadow of Jesus, and we know from the Apocryphas that Isaac was born in the middle of the 3rd month. There is the possibility that Jesus was born in the middle of the 4th month if the year in which John was born was a 12-month year. Then Jesus would have been born in the middle of the 4th month. But I don't think so. I believe with everything that is in me, the middle of the 15th or the 16th, around that evening of the 15th, going into the 16th of the 3rd month is when Jesus was born. And so this study goes into a lot of detail, and it also makes connections in terms of his conception, and when his spirit would have entered the body prepared, and of course the connection of Passover, etc. So please, that's a study to have a look at, to understand. We can know exactly when John was born. We can know exactly when Jesus was born. We can know exactly what year Jesus and John were born, based on Luke 3, which refers to the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, when Jesus turned 30. So we know that when Tiberius Caesar came into power in 14 AD, so his 15th year would have been 29 AD, which means Jesus turned 30 in 29 AD. So therefore, Jesus must have been born in 2 BC. We also know from the biblical chronology that Jesus was baptized, would have been, according to the chronology, the Messiah would arrive and be baptized and begin his ministry in 29 AD. So it's an absolute biblical confirmation of the year in which Jesus was baptized and began his ministry. 29 AD is the year. I've made reference to the biblical chronology in a number of my videos before. Again, if you're not aware of it, please have a look at these videos here. The biblical chronology is a wonderful thing to see. It was something not that I discovered. It was something that was completed. The work was done by Reverend Martin Anstey in 1913. He published his book called The Romance of Biblical Chronology. I've made a video describing that chronology and the things that he discovered, and exactly how he accurately completed a chronology exclusively on the scriptures from Adam to the baptism of Jesus Christ, so that we could know exactly what year the main events occurred in the Bible. So these 4 parts, part 1, 2, 3, and 4, covers the biblical chronology, There's a brief summary in one of these. I think 6,000 Years of Biblical Chronology covers a brief summary of that. That's also a video related to that. If you have not watched this, I would highly recommend you get into it or get the book. It's downloadable. I think in one of these videos, if not all of them, the link to the free download. It's public domain book now, published in 1913, and you can download it and read it for yourself. It's a big read. It's a big study. And so that's why I put these 4 videos together to make it a bit easier for everybody to get up to speed with regards to biblical chronology. Unfortunately, most of the entire church, as far as I can see, and most of the people that I've studied with have completely ignored this biblical chronology and see it fit to press on with their studies without understanding it. It boggles my mind because we absolutely need it. It confirms so many things for us. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. So, yeah, my encouragement is get into that. Right, so we've seen that the timing with regards to John's birth is important because it links us to Elijah and the beginning, and it links us to Luke chapter 1, which is the first event, leading to Luke chapter 2, which is John's birth, which is the next event, the 40 days of Son of Man, and the escape of the bride. And then we've got chapter 3, which is about the work that John does. It's more about the Elijah. It leads us into the end of seals. It's a bit about during seals, but largely about the end of seals going into trumpets. And then, of course, Luke chapter 4 is about the trumpets leading into the end of trumpets and the Jubilee. It was in Luke chapter 4 that Jesus declared the Jubilee when he started his ministry in the fall of 29 AD. So we can know exactly where the Jubilee was, and from that we can know to this day where the Jubilee is. We know that the next Jubilee will be in the fall of 38 going into 39 BC, 2038 to 2039 AD. And that's a straightforward calculation. 40 years is the Jubilee cycle, not 50. And if we take that 40-year cycle from the first year being in 30 AD, the next event, next Jubilee will be at the end of tribulation in 38-39 AD, 2038-39. The other part that we get to see with regards to these end times is, and we see this in the Transfiguration story, in Luke 9, we see that there's a couple of things. Well, the Transfiguration story is in all 3 Gospels, but the one in Luke is the one that the worker group need to take note of in particular. We see that there's a couple of things here that are very different from the other Transfiguration. First and foremost, it takes place, come to pass about 8 days. In Mark and Matthew, in the Transfiguration story, it says after 6 days, after these things. So at about 8 days. And so we understand that relates to the timing. We are now, when we look at the Lord works in 7-year Shemitah cycles. Okay, Daniel's 70 weeks is Shemitah cycles. So it's the harvest cycle. From the fall of a particular year, it starts and it ends in the fall. So from the 7th month to the 7th month is a harvest cycle. With 7 cycles of 7 years, leading then culminating in the 50th year, the Jubilee, which is also the first year of the next cycle. So we see that we need to understand that the tribulation is the last 2 7-year cycles, the last 2 sets of 7 for the current Jubilee cycle. And we will end with the Jubilee after the tribulation period. So we need to understand exactly where we are in that cycle. Now we can know exactly where we are because Jesus declared the Jubilee in the fall of 29, which means that the 30 AD was year 1 of the cycle, and we can determine that this year is in fact right now, since the fall of last year, we are in year 1, but we are also the year 1 is it can also be referred to as the 8th day or the 8th year. So we see that it's also referred to in Leviticus, where it describes the Jubilee cycle. It refers to the first year of the new cycle as an eighth year as well. So we know that this about 8 days is referring to about the 8th year of the Jubilee cycle, of the Shemitah cycle, which is a year 1. Okay, and we are right now in year 1. Second thing is we also know that it's connected to the 8th day circumcision event. So we know that John was born probably on the 8th day of the 11th month, which means his circumcision event would have occurred on the 16th day of the 11th month. And now this transfiguration story is leading us to believe that there's a connection here to his 8th day. So his 8th day circumcision, the 16th of the 11th month, and we are in the 8th year of the Shemitah cycle, the first year of the new cycle. So if nothing happens by the 8th of the 11th month, which is the 6th of February, then we may need to wait a week to the 16th day of the 11th month. So if we have a look at the calendar, we'll see that in the 11th month of the year, which is where we're at now, the 6th of February is the 8th day of the 11th month. And the circumcision day would have been the 16th day of the 11th month, this 8th day circumcision, which is the 14th of February 2025. Now, this calendar that I'm referring to is what I call the Aries calendar. It's the calendar that I believe was as close as possible related to the calendar that existed at the time when Jesus was crucified. The Jews' calendar is a little bit different in that they've adjusted the calendar with regards to the moving of the progressive moving of the equinox and the solstices, where there's a progression of about a month every 2,000 years. So they've made that adjustment. They are no longer in Aries. Their calendar is largely based on Pisces. So this is the Pisces calendar, the Jewish calendar. You will see that this year they're in sync at the moment with the Aries calendar because they had a 13-month year. Normally, there's a month. The Jewish calendar is a month ahead of the Aries calendar, but because they had a 13th month year last year, they are now this year they're in sync. The Pisces calendar and the Aries calendar is in sync. So both calendars, the 6th of February is the 8th day of the 11th month, and the 14th of February is the 16th day of the 11th month. If you go to view the Hebrew calendar on their website, they will probably say that the 16th day of the 11th month is the 13th of February. So the reason for that is they actually don't count New Moon Day. They start day one here, so everything is shifted forward by one day. They don't count New Moon days, which I believe is incorrect. Anyway, so the question is always, I'm fairly certain that we've got the right days in terms of the Sabbaths, new moons. What I'm still a little bit in the dark on is exactly when is the beginning of the year. I believe that it's supposed to be when the sun is in Aries, but I've also come to an understanding that Speaker must be on the horizon, on the eastern horizon, as for the beginning of the year. So as the sun sets, we should see Speaker on the horizon. So when I made that adjustment in the Aries calendar, it was a very small adjustment. In the Aries Speaker calendar, the 6th of February is still the 8th day of the 11th month, and the 14th of February is still the 16th of the 11th month. The only difference between this small adjustment, where to ensure where the beginning of the year is adjusted so that Speaker is on the horizon. Speaker, I believe, is the new name of what was originally called Abib. Abib means a grain of an ear or green grain, an ear of wheat. Speaker means exactly the same thing. So the meaning of Speaker and Abib have the same meaning, whereas Speaker is a Latin word and Abib is the Hebrew word. So Speaker, I believe, needs to be on the horizon as the sun sets. Speaker needs to be visible for the beginning of the year. When I made that small adjustment, the calendar largely remained the same except for where the 13th months were added in. So you'll see here in this adjustment, this year, 2024, we're still in the 2024 year, by the way. In this year, because we're in the 11th month, there is a 13th month in this, which means that the next year only starts on the 28th of April. In the standard Aries calendar, there's no 13th month. You see it's blank here. So that means that the next year starts on the 30th of March. And the Hebrew calendar also, so the Pisces version, the Hebrew calendar is based on Pisces. They also have, there's no 13th month. So they also, next year starts on the 30th of March. So this is the big dilemma that I have as to whether in our timing and understanding when the various feast days are for this, for next year, is whether I must use the Jews calendar, the Pisces version, or whether I must use the Aries speaker version, which has 13 months in it this year, which means that next year starts a little bit later, or if I must use the Aries version, standard Aries version, which starts on the same day as per the Jews. I'm not exactly sure yet. I do believe that I know that when Jesus was born, the year that Jesus was conceived was a 13-month year. In other words, also the same year that John was born. So if things are connected to the timing of John's birth, I would imagine that we are supposed to have a 13th month year, as it was when he was in the year that he was born. So I'm leaning more towards there being a 13th month, which means that there's 5 months difference between John's birth and Jesus' birth, as it was in the actual years that then when Jesus was born, there was 5 months difference, which is absolutely correct. It's not 6 months. But there is the possibility, and because we've got this 4-month thing, where Jesus referred in John 4 to this, you say the harvest is in 4 months, and I say it's ready now. We've been trying to understand that connection of that 4 months. Now, I made that connection believing that statement that Jesus made was a little bit earlier. In fact, that it was somewhere in the 10th month of the year that he made that statement. And in one of my previous videos, I explained why I believe that 11th month could actually be, the 10th month could actually be the equivalent of the 5th month. But in any case, I don't want to digress too much. But I did make an error in there, because when we go and look at the sequence of events that are given in John, the Gospel of John is the only gospel that we can really get a time sequence in terms of the feast days. And so we can put a time sequence of Jesus' ministry based on the Gospel of John, which I did. And let me just pull that up. Yeah. So that is this chart here. And this gives us a sequence of events from when Jesus was baptized in the year 29 AD. Jesus was 30, and it was year 483 of Daniel's 70 weeks of years. Daniel's 70 weeks is 490. So in the midst, at the end of the 69th week, is when the Messiah arrived, and so Jesus was baptized in the year 483 from the trigger of Daniel's 70 weeks. So when Cyrus decreed it, and all of that is, if you want to understand Daniel's 70 weeks and the decree and how it all perfectly lines up and demonstrates that the current general understanding of Daniel's 70 weeks and this so-called delay in the 70th week for the tribulation is absolute nonsense. It is completely wrong. It is the 70th week actually has already occurred, and it was in the middle of the 70th week that Jesus was crucified, right in the middle of the week, as the prophecy said it would happen. In the midst of the week, he made a covenant with many. And there's only one way you can have them. This is the only correct interpretation, because one, we have the biblical chronology that confirms it, and two, we have the Tiberius 15th year, which confirms all these things as well. In any case, if we take that as a start and we read the scriptures, sorry, just a quick side note again. If you're interested in getting into the Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy, then you need to get into these two videos here. This one here, Daniel's 70 week, the correct interpretation, part 1, which is the interpretation as it was in the was leading up to the is, and then you've got the second way to interpret Daniel in terms of the is leading up to the is to come, into the end of the is to come. So those two videos are well worth watching if you want to get into a true understanding of Daniel's 70 weeks. Anyway, getting back to the timing of the sequence of events, we know that in John 3, when John 4, where Jesus spoke about 4 months to harvest, we know that it was actually the timing of that John 4 was actually between the third month, between mid-year, the third and the 5th month, and tabernacles. So in my previous reckoning, I'd considered it that he had said these words between tabernacles and the winter months, that he had said these things between the winter months and Passover. But in fact, he said these words, and the 4 months actually seems to be more connected to the third month and the seventh month. The 4 months difference between the third month, the Feast of Weeks, and Feast of Trumpets, or Tabernacles more specifically, between Feast of Weeks, middle of the third month, and Tabernacles, 4 months later, which is the middle of the seventh month. And that seems to be what he's referring to in terms of the 4 months. Would you say the harvest, probably referring to the harvest festival, is in 4 months, but I say the harvest is ready now, and white now. So this statement was also made at the time when Jesus had just spoken to the Samaritan woman at the well. And we know that this is a Gentile bride connection. This whole event that took place was connected to the Gentile bride. And so all of this was all in that time frame of about between the third and the fifth month at that time frame. So it seems to me that the white harvest that he was referring to here actually was more related to the first fruits of the wheat harvest, the bride, that would be taken 4 months before the end of the harvest or the harvest celebration. So I think that would be more accurate in terms of the timing of events if one considers the chronological events provided for us in the book of John or the Gospel of John, which are based on the feasts. If you read the Gospel, the markers are the feast days, Passover, Tabernacles, and a Feast of Weeks. Passover, Tabernacles, and Feast of Weeks. So those are the markers that we can put timings to these various things that occurred. So this 4 months here, I believe, was actually the time between the middle of the third month and the middle of the seventh month. So that puts. So if we go back to the calendar, this is where we are now, and we're looking at the commissioning of the worker group now, but the bride being taken in the next year in the middle of the third month. That's what we're looking at here now. We also know there's a few other interesting. We know that the 15th day of the 11th month is also referred to as the New Year of Trees. It's the date that the tithes were any harvest occurring before this date. What the tithe would be considered to be part of the previous year's tithe, and any harvest after this date would be considered as part of the new year's tithe. So this was an end of year, beginning of year in terms of tithes. It's connected to John's birth, and it's also connected to Moses' birth. That's what I wanted to get into here. So if we have a look at Moses, we know that in this study, I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but basically what we see here is that Moses, he lived 100 to 120 years, and his lifespan was split into 3 equal parts of 40 years. In the first 40 years, he spent in Egypt, learning the ways of the world. And he was, according to the Apocryphas, he was an army. He was a general in the Egyptian army, so he was a military man and a well-educated man, and he was also brought up with the understanding of the Hebrew culture as well. So he understood his roots. After it was at the end of the 40 years that he then killed the Egyptian soldier, and he then escaped into the wilderness, and he spent the next 40 years of his life tending Jethro's, the priest of Midian. He tended sheep, so he married Jethro's daughter, and he then, so he was a shepherd for 40 years in the wilderness, and then there was the burning bush event, and the Lord commissioned him to go and to lead his people, the people of God, the Israelites, out of Egypt to the promised land. And he spent the next 40 years of his life doing that. The significance of these 3 sets of 40 years, I believe, is a type and shadow of the work that the Moses worker group, this Elijah Moses worker group, will be conducting during the end times. And if I could just run through that very briefly, I believe that the 40 years is related to 40 months. So the first set of 40 years in Moses' case, where it was training, it was preparation period, would be equate to the 3 years preparation period before the tribulation for the worker group. Then the next set of 40 months, which would be 3.5 years, would be the worker group tending to the sheep in the wilderness, just like Moses tended to the sheep in the wilderness of Jethro's sheep in the wilderness. So the worker group will tend to the sheep for 3.5 years in the wilderness. And then the final set of 40 years, which is related to the final set of 40 months or 3.5 years of seals, will be when the worker group, the Moses group, will be leading a group of people out of Egypt, out of the world, back to the promised land in preparation for the re-entry into and the taking again of the promised land for the time of trumpets. So that's where I believe that the type and shadow fits in. If you can just follow that understanding, the 3 sets of 40 years relates to 3 sets of 40 months or 3 sets of 3.5 years for the worker group. So we've got a type and shadow there in the work that Moses did. We have a similar type of type and shadow in the life and the work of Elijah. We see that when Elijah comes on the scene in 1 Kings 17, he initiates by the power that the Father has given him a 3.5 year famine, and so his beginning of his ministry is 3.5 years during that 3.5 year famine. In that time, through the power of the Lord is the Lord through him heals a leper, provides supernaturally for Elijah's needs in the feeding of Elijah by the ravens in the wilderness, and where Elijah also supernaturally provides for the widow, where oil and flour are never ending from her pots. And then, of course, there's the raising of the widow's son, from raising him from the dead. So these supernatural events are again types and shadows of the type of things that the worker group, the Elijah worker group, will be doing during that first 3.5 years of seals. Then after that famine is broken, we see Elijah, he warns Ahab and in particular and Jezebel, his wife, of their demise. Sorry, just one other thing, during that first 3.5 years, he also challenges the false priests, the priests of Baal, the false priests, he challenges them. So yeah, that's also during the first 3.5 years. Then the second 3.5 years of his ministry is more again in the wilderness. He feels he's the only one that's left that hasn't bent their knee to Baal. The Lord says to him, no, there are 7,000 others, which is a type and shadow of the 144,000 that don't bend their knee to the Antichrist. And then we've got, that leads up to the point in time where Elijah then recruits or trains or leads Elisha. And we see that when Elijah comes across Elisha is leading a span of oxen, a span of 12 oxen. So we see that again, that Elisha is the type and shadow of the 144,000, the 12 tribes, where Elisha then takes over from Elijah and receives the double portion, just as the 144,000 of Revelation 7 takes over from the first group of 144,000 of Revelation 14, but receive a double portion for the time during their work during the time of trumpets, which is the equivalent of the Elisha type of work that Elisha did. So we've got those types and shadows in the ministries of Elijah and Moses that I believe that we will see play out again in the type of work that this worker group over the time of seals will be doing. And we know that he started this new ministry. His work of the Exodus story started when he had just turned 80, and so he stood before Pharaoh. He was 80 when he stood before Pharaoh, and based on the story there, if we go back to Deuteronomy, and that's what this study was all about, is to determine when, according to the scriptures, that Moses was born. And this study gets into the detail of Deuteronomy, and Deuteronomy gives us exactly one date, the first day of the 11th month, and right at the beginning. And it seems that the whole of Deuteronomy was written in about a month. And in that book, Moses says that he is now 120 years old. And so from the first day, or somewhere in the 11th month, he had turned 120 years old, and he died during that month, or just at the end of the 11th or the beginning of the 12th month, based on this study. So we know that, to cut a long story short, we know that Moses was born sometime in the 11th month. Just like John was born sometime in the 11th month, Moses was born sometime in the 11th month. And just like John the Baptist started his ministry when he turned 30, at his birthday, he would have started his ministry. So Moses also started his ministry when he was turned 80 in the 11th month. And then there were a few months during which the plagues took place, so probably the 11th, 12th, and there's possibly that there was a 13th month as well. We don't know for certain, but in that year there's maybe a 13th month, or maybe not. Maybe there was only two and a half months, or about 3 months, if there was a 13th month, maybe a little longer, 3 months, 3.5 of plagues before they actually departed in the middle of the first month. And so I think that's really the main thing that we need to consider here, is that Moses started his work in the 11th month. And we see that in the Transfiguration story, we've got Moses and Elijah. Moses and Elijah are there with Jesus. So we have this connection about the worker group being about in 8 days, in the 8th year, on the 8th day, probably the 8th day of circumcision, this Transfiguration event. And there are some other interesting things that I just want to point out here in the Luke version of the Transfiguration story. It's the only one version where they enter into the cloud. So it says in Luke 1 that while he spoke, there came a cloud and overshadowed them, and they feared as they entered into the cloud. There is a study that I did on this, and I just want to show it so that you know what it looks like. Yeah, it's very short, just the extracts from the 3 events, the 3 versions. And you see that while he spake, a cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice came out of the cloud and said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." You see, there's no mention about going in. In Mark, and there was a cloud that overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud and said, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." But Luke says, while he thus spake, there came a cloud and overshadowed them, and they feared as they entered into the cloud. And there came a voice out of the cloud and saying, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." So it's the only one where they enter into the cloud. And I believe that this is also a connection to the worker group. This going into the cloud is like is Mount Sinai story, where Moses goes into there's a cloud that covers the Mount Sinai. What we're seeing here is what we refer to as Mount Zion, where those that go to Mount Zion go into the cloud. This going into the cloud, and the cloud is a connection to the presence of Mount Zion. Whatever Mount Zion looks like, I don't know, but in the scriptures we see this referred to as the cloud, and in the cloud. And Moses, when he goes up to Mount Sinai, when you read the description there, he doesn't just go to an ordinary mountain. You can see he goes to some sort of a throne room, and it's not much different to the throne room that's described by John in Revelations, and it's not much different to the mobile throne room that's described by Ezekiel in chapters 1 and 2, I think it is, in Ezekiel. So we definitely got this mobile throne room stroke Mount Zion, whatever it is, and when they go into it, they go into a cloud. So we have this connection here of going into a cloud, but only for the Luke group, only connected to the Luke's transfiguration story. And then the other difference is it's the only place where they speak about the decease which he should accomplish in Jerusalem. So Moses and Elijah speak to Jesus, and they appeared in glory and spake of his decease which he should accomplish in Jerusalem. That's not that is not in Mark or Matthew. It's only in Luke where they speak about his decease which he will accomplish. Now this word decease can be death or it can be exit. Okay, so they're speaking about some sort of exit plan, and whether it's a decease or something very similar to a decease, but not quite, but definitely something happens with regards to his exit, and I believe that's connected to his exit of his 40 days. Okay, so because it's only in the transfiguration story of Luke. So we see this transfiguration story connected to the workers going into the cloud, and you'll see these connections where how it connects to Revelations also. We'll get into that now. So we've got this timing where it's connected to the New Year of Trees. It's a time connected to John's birth and his eight-day circumcision. It's connected to Moses' birth. It's connected to the transfiguration story of about 8 days. There's one last thing that we also see here is they speak about a secrecy when they came out of the when they came down from the hill. And Jesus tells them not to speak to anybody about these. Well, they don't say anything about it. Yeah. And when the voices had passed, Jesus was found alone, and they kept it close and told no man in those days any of those things which they had seen. So they didn't share anything about this event. This is a secret event for that group. And I believe that that's exactly what's going to happen now for this worker group, that they're not going to disappear. They may be taken up to Mount Zion for a meeting there in the upper room. And they will not be telling anybody about that particular event. And it is the Moses Elijah worker group that will be taking place at this point in time. Not the escape of the bride yet, but this worker group, they return, and then there's some work to be done. And we see that this is perfectly in line with Luke chapter 1, the first event, before the bride is taken and the 40 days of the Son of Man. So we see that this worker group is also now, what is their purpose? I believe their purpose is much like Paul's purpose. Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles, and this worker group will be the apostles largely to the Gentiles. And their task, just like Paul's task, was to prepare the bride, the Gentile bride. So too, this worker group, their main task will be the preparation of the Gentile bride, and together with those that will be accounted worthy. We see also in Romans 11:13, he said, "For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify my office." So there he just confirms that he was the apostle to the Gentiles. And then we see in 2 Corinthians 11:2 also, he said, "For I am jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." Okay, a chaste virgin to Christ. So he was responsible for the preparing of the Gentile bride as a chaste virgin, as like a virgin, not necessarily physically a virgin, but spiritually a virgin. So in the video clip that I'm going to share a bit later on, you'll get to understand, you'll get to see a little bit more of this as they expand a bit on that as well. So we see that the worker group will be doing much like Paul. Paul was a type of this worker group that will come again, this Elijah, Moses, Paul group. Okay, then I just want to make the connection to the timing. We see that in the beginning of Revelations. Now we've got when we go to Revelations 4, we see that when John is brought into the throne room, he sees the 24 elders and the 4 living beings. Okay, it's translated in the King James as 4 beasts, but I believe that the more meaningful translation would be living beings. So the 4 living beings are there, and he describes them. So they're in the throne room, and they later on they sing a new song. In Revelations 5, we see that when the Lamb takes the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us, thy God, redeemed us to God by the blood of by thy blood, out of every kindred, tongue, and people and nation, and has made us to our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth." So we see that the 24 elders and the 4 living beings are actually people. They're redeemed. Okay, they're not angels. They're not. They are people. They are humans. They are redeemed, and only humans can be redeemed. So we see these 2 groups in the throne room. Then we also see the other group that we see in Revelations 14 that gets to sing like a new song. You see that there's the 144,000 standing before stood And I looked as well. Let's just read that. Revelation 40. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him, there's the in the cloud, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written in their foreheads. So his father's name written in their foreheads, and this is different from the Revelation 744,000, where they are sealed with the seal of God. They're seal of the living God. So they're having the seal of the living God. They don't have the name of the Father written in the foreheads. It's a different group. Okay, if you look carefully, you'll see there are a number of differences between the groups. And so anyway, this group, they sang as it were a new song. So like a new song, before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn the song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. So this group is also 144,000 that are redeemed from the earth. They are humans. Okay, they are people, men and women, children probably even, I don't know. These are they which were not defiled with women. Okay, they had not defiled themselves with idolatry. This is not a physical act of between a man and woman. This is spiritual. So woman, that speaks of idolatry. Okay, for they are virgins. So they are like virgins, just like Paul his task was to prepare them chaste, like chaste virgins or like virgins. And these are they which follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. So we have this 144,000 connection to, and these are in some way through the new song. They are in some way connected to the 24 elders and the four living beings. Yet, and in the 144,000 of Revelation 7, they don't get to sing a new song. These are sealed servants of the God, sealed with the seal of the living God, and the number of them that were sealed is 144,000 of all the tribes of Israel. So there is a strong connection here between this group and the Ezekiel 9 group. You see in Ezekiel 9, and I just want to go into that a little bit now. In Ezekiel 9, there's a group that are also sealed in their foreheads. Just a recap, we see that in Ezekiel chapters 1 to 8 describes where Ezekiel sees the mobile throne room, as I like to call it. He gets instruction to enact a warning. It was a 430-day warning broken up into 390 days and 40 days. There were 7 days before it, and there was another time period, the total time period for the whole event between the two dates that are given to us. The first date was given to us in the first chapter, and the second date, the end date was given to us, was given in the 8th chapter. And then he's taken in the spirit and he's shown all the idolatry that's happening in the temple. Now in 9, he gets to see in the spirit what was going to transpire at the destruction of Jerusalem, and so this was a description where there are 6 angels, it appears, or authorities that are tasked with ensuring the slaughter of the men, women, and children in Jerusalem, except for those that are marked on their foreheads. So we see that the Lord said unto him, go in the midst of the city, through the midst of the Jews, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst hereof. And to the others, that's to the others that he referred to, that he said, to the others he said in my hearing, go after him through the city. So after the marking is complete, after go through the city and smite, let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity, slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom the mark is, and begin at my sanctuary. And it goes on to say, defile the house and fill the courts with slain. And then while Ezekiel sees the slaying, he says, while they were slaying them, I fell upon my face and I cried, and I said, Lord, wilt thou destroy all the residue of Israel in thy pouring out of thy fury upon Jerusalem. And then he said unto me, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great. Now, I pointed this out before in one of my videos. It's interesting that the house of Israel was already judged. They're already out of the land, the 10 tribes, the 10 northern tribes. They've already been dispersed, the house of Israel, and yet the Lord refers to the house of Israel and the house of Judah, who were the only ones in the land at the time, and he says that their iniquity is exceedingly great. This seems to be more about a prophecy about end times than for its own day. It was for its own day, but there's an end time connotation to this whole prophecy, largely because the house of Israel is also included in this. And so we need to understand that this is speaking about this time that we're right now. The house of Israel, the world, not the world, the people that are, the 10 tribes that are scattered through the world are also guilty of iniquity. And the iniquity is exceedingly great, as well as Judah, the people that are right now in the land of Israel. And the land is full of blood, and the city is full of perverseness, and that's the cities around the world that we see now. And he goes on to say, as for me also, my eye shall not spare, neither will I have pity, but I will recompense their way upon their heads. So he's going to take judgment. Now, the connection I want to make is you see that there's a sealing of a group of people before the attack on Jerusalem, which happened from the 7th, the 8th, and 9th to the 10th of the 5th month. There was a tremendous attack on the city of Jerusalem when this actually happened, this vision that Ezekiel saw, but means that before that attack happened, there was a seal placed on certain people, probably different men, women, children. Although it speaks about men, yeah, I do believe it was men, women, and children that were marked and sealed, they were sealed and they were protected against this judgment because they took exception to the idolatry that was taking place and the iniquity that was taking place at the time. And that is what there's an interesting connection between this and the sealing of the 144,000 in Revelation 7, which means, I've long been of the understanding that the Revelation 7 group is sealed just before, during the time of the sixth seal, just before the rapture. But I've actually come to the conclusion that actually the sealing of this 144,000 of Revelation 7, the 12,000 from each of the different tribes, actually happens just before the first attack on Jerusalem in these end times. They are sealed just before, and they will not. There's going to be a massive bloodshed. We speak about the first attack and the second attack of Jerusalem. I'm telling you now, the first attack is going to be far worse than the second attack. It's going to be far more bloody, far more disastrous for Jerusalem than the second attack. The worst one for Jerusalem is the first attack. And but before that attack, the 144,000 of Revelation 7 will be sealed. Maybe they are not all in Jerusalem, but they are wherever they are in the world. Because remember, this is a judgment on the house of Israel and Judah. So this attack on Jerusalem will also probably coincide with attacks around the world, probably on the Jews, driven by the spirit of that. It's not just about the Jews in Jerusalem. The people of Judah and the house of Israel will be attacked around the world. But there is a group that will be sealed. They're not part of the bride. They're not part of the worker group. They're not Gentile bride. They are Israelites, and they will be marked to be part of that 144,000. And that marking takes place now, just before the first attack, before the tribulation. Okay, so that's just something that I wanted to point out. So we have this connection to Ezekiel 9, and this is something that will also be shared in the video that I'm just going to play a link to it. So we need to try and do now is put an understanding together of where the 24 elders, the 4 beasts, the 144,000 of Revelation 7, and the 144,000 of Revelation 14 all fit in the picture. Before I can go any further on that, I need to stress that in order to correctly understand the sequence of events within Revelation, you must understand the structure of Revelation. Revelation is partly sequential, but there are some of the chapters that are are sequential but start earlier than what most people believe. In other words, let me just refer to a chart that I put together some time ago. In this, this is a bit of an eye test. I just briefly I discussed this in great detail in a video when I did a study on the beasts of Revelation. In that video, I think there were two videos, the Beast of Revelation, these two videos here. But in this video here, I'll go into the structure of Revelation, because to understand the sequence of events for end times, you've got to understand the structure of Revelation. And so what we're seeing here is that when you read Revelation, and let me just zoom in a little bit here, you must understand that its structure is really the first few chapters are the base, and then it forms like almost like a hierarchy, a pyramid type situation. Okay, and that's what I tried to depict here. So let me just go through it very briefly. You've got the base chapters, Revelation chapters 1, 2, and 3. Revelation 4 starts getting into setting up the throne room and the introduction of Mount Zion. And then you've got then Revelation 5 starts speaking about the seals in the book and the beginning of the opening of seals. And we see there's a group there. And I'm going to get into the groups now. There's a couple of groups that are mentioned in Revelations. In fact, there's 6 groups that are mentioned in Revelations. And I'll define those 6 groups now. But in Revelations 5, we get to meet some of those groups. The 24 elders, the 4 beasts. We get to meet the many angels, the 10,000, some 10,000, and thousands of thousands of angels. And then we get to see the 6 seals being opened up, and then we're introduced to another group, the 144,000 of Revelation 7. And then we see that there's the 7th seal is opened in Revelation 8. Revelation 9, we've got all the trumpets, the trumpets, the description of the trumpets. And then Revelation 10 is the conclusion. So these are all nicely in sequence from 5 to 10, and probably 4 also. I could have even brought 4 in as part of that sequence. But then you would think it goes to 11, 12, 13, but that's in fact not the case. You've got to read chapters 14 to 11 in reverse. So it doesn't go 11, 12, 13, 14. You've got to read 14, 13, 12, 11, and 10 would be a reverse sequence of events, with 10 being common to both those legs. So 10 is common to this leg, but 10 is also common to this leg. So chapter 14 runs in parallel with Revelation 5. Revelation 13 is in parallel with 6. And Revelation 12 is in parallel with 7 and 8. And Revelation 11 is in parallel with Revelation 9. And then of 10 is common. And then, of course, then it goes sequential from there, from 15 onwards, 15, 16 onwards, with the exception of 17 and 18. They seem to be special chapters that are more detailed. So where many people put the Revelation 14 later in the story, Revelation 14 happens right at the beginning of the story. This is part of the first worker group. Revelation 14 is that first worker group. When you understand that, and you understand that these other things that are mentioned in Revelations 14 are part of the beginning of tribulations, then things start falling into place. So I'm going to make a reference to a study that I did. This was a study that, this was speaking of the 144,000 of Revelation 14, and how they compare with the 24 elders and the 4 living beings, or the 4 beasts, concerning the new song. So I'd highly recommend a read through this study to understand that the connections between the two, which I've already mentioned that both groups are redeemed. Both groups sing a new song in the case of the 24 elders and the 4 beasts, and like a new song in the case of 144,000. And but the one group is in the throne room, and the other group is standing on Mount Zion. And we see then also in the study, I mentioned also where the many angels fit into the whole equation, the 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, and the difference between them and the 24 elders and the 4 beasts versus the 144,000. So they and that group seems to be the bride, and the 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands is that comes in Revelations 5 is the bride and those that are counted worthy, that are brought into the throne room together with the 24 elders and the 4 living beings. This study really goes into the detail of that. So without going into detail on the study, I just want to focus a little bit on that new song that they sing, and the connection that it has to Psalm 96 and 98, which seems to characterize the groups as workers or harvest workers and the army. Okay, so I want to just read through Psalm 96, and we see in verses 1 to 3. Psalm 96: "Oh, sing unto the Lord. Oh, sing unto the Lord a new song. Sing unto the Lord, all the earth. Sing unto the Lord, bless his name, show forth his salvation from day to day, declare his glory among the heathen, his wonders among all the people. So there you see there's a worker group being a witness, going out, showing the salvation and declaring his glory. Okay, and that is sing a new song. Okay, sing unto the Lord a new song. Then Psalm 98, we have a similar thing. It says, okay, this thing's annoying. Sing unto the Lord a new song, for he hath done marvelous things in his right his right hand and his holy arm hath gotten him the victory. The Lord hath made known his salvation. His righteousness hath he openly showed in the sight of the heathen. He hath redeemed, he hath remembered his mercy and his truth towards the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all the earth. Make a loud noise and rejoice and sing praise. Sing unto the Lord with harp and with harps and the voice of a psalm, with the trumpets and the sound of a cornet. Make a joyful noise before the Lord, the King. Let the sea roar and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. Let the floods clap their hands, let the hills be joyful together before the Lord, for he cometh to judge the earth with righteousness, and he shall judge the world and the people with equity. So we see that connection. When you read this, you see this is that new song. This is a worker group that the Lord has brought about. That was the one thing in the study that I wanted to highlight. The other thing that I wanted to highlight in the studies was the makeup of the 24 elders and the 4 living beings. There was a time back in the study, the precursor to this study was called King of Kings. Okay, and this one, which is titled and they're saying like a new song, is a replacement for that original study of King of Kings. But there's one thing that, so I've made revisions to it, and there was one section in King of Kings that I think I actually got it right, and that was with, and I need to bring it back into the study again. I need to revise it back in here again. You see, the makeup of the 24 elders and the 4 living beings, I believe, is also 144,000. In fact, I'm beginning to believe, I've come to the conclusion that there are 3 groups of 144,000. So I've already mentioned that there's 2 groups. Revelation 7 and Revelation 14 groups of 144,000 are not the same group. Okay, they're 2 completely different descriptions, 2 different times that they're coming to being. But we've got this 24 elders and the 4 living beings, which are already in the throne room when John gets there. And I believe that they are also a group of 144,000. And I came to understand that group of 144,000 is made up of 2 groups of 12,000 and 1 group of 120,000, which are Gentiles brought in. Now, whether they are Gentiles brought in after Jesus' death and resurrection, or whether they are Gentiles that lived prior to Jesus' death and resurrection. But it matters not, because whatever Jesus did on the cross was valid both forwards and backwards. So both from Adam all the way through. So the work that he does is always, it's not bound to time. It's not only from that point in time going forward. It was from that point in time, but time past and time forward. So in this description, I do believe that it was valid, and I took it out, but I need to bring it back in again. And I think that the 24 elders are the 2 groups of 12,000 Israelites, probably connected to the tribes of Dan and Ephraim, which are not mentioned in Revelation 7. But it doesn't necessarily have to be only from those, but they are Israelites. Whereas the remaining 120,000 are from the Gentile nations. And we see that this group of 120,000, I think we see evidence of them in different places. I'll get to where we see them, but I do believe that their makeup is 4 groups of 30,000, 120,000, 4 living beings, 30,000 per each group, for each of the groups. Whether those are different groups from different times through the history, I don't know, but they are 4 groups, and each of these groups are made up of 6 groups of 5,000. where the living beings have 6 wings and there are eyes on each of the wings. Eyes speak of wisdom. And so I think that that's really the makeup of that. But there's a fair amount of conjecture in that. Then the evidence that we see with regards to why 120,000 Gentiles, we see that in the story of Queen Sheba, the Queen of the South that Jesus referred to, that she comes in the judgment. Queen of the South in Luke 11:31, Queen of the South shall rise in the judgment with the men of this generation and condemn them, for she came from uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here, referring to himself. So we have this connection of into the end times of Queen of the South, Queen Sheba. And Queen Sheba, when she visited Solomon, she actually gave him 120 talents, which relates to 120,000 souls. And then, so we see that in 1 Kings 10, 8-10, that story, she gave the king 120 talents of gold and spices, very great store, and precious stones, and there came no more such abundant spice as these which the Queen Sheba gave to the King Solomon. So there's a type and shadow here of the Gentile group coming in together with lots of prayer, okay? Spices, great store. And then we see it also in the story of Jonah, where he is a warning to Nineveh, and we see that Nineveh repents, and Jonah, in Jonah 4:11, we said, and should I not spare Nineveh, that great city wherein there are more than 6,000 persons. So 6 score is 106, is 120, 6 scores is 6 times 20, it's 120,000 persons that cannot discern between the right hand and the left hand, and also much cattle. So we see here there's a connection to this 144,000 comprising 120,000 Gentiles and much cattle, referring to the Israelite group, the 24,000. So I think that we see that evidence over there. And then finally, we've got David's army, or this worker group that were appointed to work in the temple. They were 288,000, totaling the two groups of 144,000 would total 288,000. But over and above that, he also had 38,000 singers or choir members and porters. And so there's also that connection. And we see that in this, where Jesus said in Acts 15, in Acts 15, it was Peter that actually stood up and he said, after they had held the peace, James answered, it wasn't Peter, James answered, his men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simeon had declared how the Lord had first visited Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, after this I will return, and I will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down, and I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, so that the residue of men might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doth all these things, known unto God are all his works from the beginning of the world. So we see James is making reference to a prophecy where the Lord said that he would build again the tabernacle of David. So for this we need to understand the prophecy. It's in Amos, and we need to understand what the tabernacle of David was. So for that, I'd recommend you go and read through this study here. I will build again the tabernacle of David. And so that's the verse I've just read for you now. Here's the prophecy, the original prophecy in Amos 9:11. In that day will I raise up a tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build as in the days of old. And isn't that interesting that it's a 9:11? So we see that the tabernacle of David, in the study, we see that the tabernacle of David is that army that, he had a very specific tabernacle, very different from the temple and very different from the tabernacle of Moses. And so I'm going to leave you to read that here. But it is also connected to singing and the choir and the 288,000 that he set up. So those are very nice connections. You've got to understand the tabernacle of David. If you want to understand the prophecy of what Jesus is going to do in rebuilding or building again the tabernacle of David, and how it's connected to two groups of 144,000 plus a choir group, which in David's time was 38,000, but actually might be 144,000 in these end days. And so I'm beginning to see the picture of this three groups of 144,000 coming together. And that group of Revelation 14 may in fact be a choir group. I don't know. But I'm not the only one seeing it. And so I would highly recommend you go and have a look through the study and understand these 144,000, that they are different groups and that they have a specific purpose, and that the Lord has said that he would do it. And he would build again the tabernacle of David. And there will be worship, as it was in the tabernacle of David. There will be worship again in these times. And he's going to build it. Now, the interesting thing is that we see that it all starts, that he makes mention of this in Acts 15. And we understand that Acts 15, in terms of the chapters to years, Acts has 28 chapters, and the first 14 chapters are in line with the 14, there are events described in the first 14 chapters that line up with the events of the 14 years of tribulation. And then it starts again that the chapters 15 to 28 are also these events lining up with the 14 years of tribulation of year. So chapter 15 is connected to year 1. And so we see that from year 1, he's going to build again the tabernacle of David. So again, we see that 144,000 of Revelation 14, which happens right in the beginning, is part of that rebuilding, building again of the tabernacle of David. And in fact, we've already got the 24 elders and the 4 living beings also there already in the throne room. But a little bit later on, although they might be sealed, the 144,000 of Revelation 7 are sealed right in the beginning here, they only begin their work 6 years later at the end of seals going into trumpets. So that's a study well worth looking at. So at this point, I'm going to, we're now an hour and 40 minutes or so into this teaching. And I want to take the next 15 minutes or so and just go through a video that I came across recently. And I think they have an understanding. They've shed some light on the subject in a different way. And I just want you to hear it.
We're going to answer your questions about the 144,000. Are they men? Are they women? Who could they be? And what about this virgin thing we got going on? We got so many questions that we're about to answer for you. Buckle up, people. This is going to be a good one. Okay, Brian, so what we're looking at an image of the Kochon Revelation, the scroll of mysteries from chapter 14. And so I want you to just get an imagery of this, and then we're going to move on to the next slide, and we'll introduce you to something that we've been comparing it to. So remember, you guys, Brian, in chapter 7 of Revelation, we were introduced to the 144,000. And then I did a comparison to Ezekiel 9, 1 through 5. And if I may, I would like to read through Ezekiel 9 so that you can get an idea as to what's going on in Ezekiel 9. Then he called out in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, "Let those who have charge over the city draw near, each with his deadly weapon in his hand." And suddenly 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with his battle axe in his hand. One man among them was clothed with linen and had a writer's inkhorn at his side. They went in and stood beside the slaughter place. Now the glory of Elohim of Israel had gone up from the cherub where it had been to the threshold of the temple. And he called to the man clothed with linen who had the writer's inkhorn at his side. And Jehovah said to him, "Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within it." To the others, he said in my hearing, "Go after him through the city and kill. Do not let your eyes spare, nor have any pity. Utterly slay old and young men, maidens and young children and women. But do not come near anyone on whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary." So then they began with the elders who were before the temple. And then he said to them, "Defile the temple and fill the courts with the slain. Go out." And they went out and they killed in the city. So there's this weeping of what's going on in Jerusalem. There's these atrocities that are happening. And Ezekiel 9 is a prophecy of the future. And it's a people that there are those that will be sealed and those that will be killed, right? And so Ezekiel 9 is about a punishment that comes upon both Israel and Judah. But the northern kingdom, Brian, the kingdom of Israel, had already fallen more than a century before Ezekiel wrote this prophecy. So it appears to be clearly that this was written for a future destruction of Israel and Judah. Now, I want you to think about this, the mark upon the foreheads of the people that's in Jerusalem, weeping for Jerusalem. And it's like the phrase that you'll see in Hebrew. It says, Tav al mitzvot. That means mark on the foreheads. This is the same phrase that you see in Revelation 7, verse 3, word for word. And let me explain how important this is. There is no manuscript to date other than the Kochian Hebrew manuscript, the Scroll of Mysteries, that has this phrase word for word that matches in Ezekiel 9, verse 4. Now take notice that it says, of the men, ha-anashim, the men, ha-anashim. Now we look at these verses and we say, is this men or is it men and women? Because when it's masculine plural, it can also be common plural, meaning that it's men and women. But better yet, it can be men, women, and children. In other words, the people. Okay. So then we look for clues. Is this men, women, or men only, or men and women and children? And so now we look at these verses and we see there are those who were crying out over the abominations. And then you have that now there's a people that's being killed, the maidens, children, and women. And then we have nothing else that tells us that this is only men in Ezekiel 9 that is being sealed, right? There's nothing grammatically that tells us that this is only men being sealed in Ezekiel 9.
Okay, so we see there that they pretty much see it the way I do. And in that there's a connection between Revelation 7, 144,000, and this Ezekiel 9. Now, Ezekiel 9, I just want to remind you that is it's clearly a prophecy of an event that's happening to Jerusalem, the slaying that takes place in Jerusalem, the first attack. Okay, and we see this this connection between the sealing of the 144,000 of Revelation 7 and the 144,000, or there's no number mentioned, but and the sealing of those in Jerusalem. Now, these guys in their study, they have not separated, or they do not distinguish the difference between the Revelation 7's 144,000 and Revelation 14's 144,000. So if you watch the rest of the video, just bear that in mind. Now we're going to get into a little bit more detail about the singing, and these guys have something really interesting to say with regards to some of the work that they've done in studying the Hebrew text around this singing a new song. And I think this really adds a significant amount of depth to the importance of understanding that this singing a new song is actually a lot more important than what we've to date given credence to.
So I do want to talk about the singing right now. The singing is extremely important.
I wish I could sing. I try my hardest. I want to be one of these guys who can sing.
I want to sing, especially now that I've got this raspy voice and this issue that I've got. I really want to sing. These are people that are singing, that are doing a God singing. Now, I did go into a teaching with Jeff and Miranda Brannon on the Way Remnant, and I'll show that slide shortly. And this is a miraculous gift of God of miracle singing, right? This is not your normal, average, everyday singing. And because the root of that word of mezamerim, the root of that is zamar. Zamar is the miracle singing, and we will touch on that shortly as well. Now, they're singing this renewed song or new song, and they're singing it before the creatures and the elders, and no one was able to learn the song but the 144,000 that he redeemed from the ground, and we'll touch on that as well.
And can I just jump in real quick?
Of course.
I just want to say, I remember learning about the 144,000, and I came to know the Bible kind of late in life, and I started interacting with these different denominations, and they had all these different theories on what the 144,000 would be doing. Like, oh, these are mercenaries, or these are missionaries, or these are people who are going to be leading people and doing all these things. And I'm reading, I'm like, these people are singing. They're singers, and they're going to do praise and worship before the Lamb. I'm like, why are people adding all these different ideas of what these guys, or maybe they'll be in charge of a planet. I know there's some religions out there. Each one of these 144,000 are going to get their own planet. Y'all are doing too much. Just stick with the way they're singing.
I've never heard that one before, Brian. That's funny. Well, we don't know other than what we have written here. Mm-hmm. And so these are interesting theories, and we'll have to see what happens when the time comes. Now, I do want you to look at this next line. These are those who did not sin with the women and are like virgins. Now, I want you to see that word like virgins. That's in Hebrew. You see the kaf before the word betulot. And what that is the kaf is a prefix that means like or as. So now they're not virgins. They're like a virgin. Like so they're pure. Cleansed, right? They're clean, they're pure, right? They've been cleansed by the blood of the Lamb. This is who they are. So, and they're going after the Lamb. They were purchased or redeemed for the firstborn of Jehovah and the Lamb. So now these are redeemed by the Lamb of Jehovah, which is Yeshua. And then you get to the next line. You see, in their spirit there is no deceit, for they are blameless before the throne of Jehovah. Now, I put two images up there. The second one, it just says Betulot in Hebrew. That is from the Manchester Gaster 1616. Manchester Gaster 1616, unfortunately, is a very corrupted manuscript. And that was in the early 1900s that this was copied from the Cochin manuscript. And he failed to add the Kaf prefix. Was it accidental? Was it purposeful? I don't know. But he removed it. And that's why it's important, because you need to see that the Manchester Gaster 1616 manuscript is very corrupted. Unfortunately, it is not one. It's beautiful handwriting, but not a good manuscript to reference.
Yeah, that was the one I started out with when we were translating and transcribing. I started out in the Gaster, and then I thought, man, this one's so amazing, this one's so beautiful, and then you start comparing it, you start seeing all the modifications. You're like, they really messed that one up. Yeah,
they did, and that's a very unfortunate thing, because you're right, the handwriting is just beautiful. And it's just unfortunate that we just have to point out these things and let the people know that the Manchester Gaster 1616 is just a very corrupted manuscript. So, but I want you to notice these pronouns, those, they. This is not from any of this information. We cannot gather a gender from this, right? It cannot be just men, and it is not Jewish men, right? So this is now people in general. It's those, them. They're like virgins. By the way, Betulot is also feminine plural, by the way. They're like virgins. So, I mean, if we get into the technicality, are they all feminine virgins? No, it's just, these are metaphors of saying these are people who are like virgins. They're cleansed by the blood of the Lamb of Yeshua, right? Mm-hmm. And so let's go to the next slide, Brian. So let's look at the virgins and the women metaphors. To sin with women. Revelation is a book filled with metaphors. One metaphor is that it's used throughout the Bible, and that the women stands for a woman of worship. And so you can see this in Isaiah 121, Jeremiah 2, verse 2, 3, 7 through 11, Ezekiel 16, Nahum 3, 1 through 4, Hosea 1, 3, 4, 15, 5, 5, and Lamentations 1, 1. And of course, Matthew 12, 39. So this is a metaphor to sin with women, those women, those that are women that are probably prostitutes, women of the world. So they didn't sin with this idolatry. So, and it represents idolatry. And that's exactly what it represents. They didn't do any idol worship at all. Now, to be a virgin, you can see that in Revelation 14:4, the metaphor that is a virgin who is pure from idolatry. And you can see that in Jeremiah 46:11, Amos 5:2, 2 Corinthians 11:2, and Revelation 18:4. So you see these metaphors. These are pure and clean people who did not sin in idolatry, and they were cleansed by the blood of the Lamb. So I think we've hit kind of hard on that. I just wanted to make sure that people understand these metaphors, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, Zamar. So we talked a little bit about this with, as I said, Jeff and Miranda at The Way Remnant on their YouTube channel. And so that root Zamar, it is actually a powerful word that can mean God singing. And so when I first learned about this word, I was in my e-course at the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies. And the gentleman that was teaching my class, he is a Cohen in Jerusalem, which means he's a priest in Jerusalem. And we started talking about a few things as far as the linguistics and things like that. So when you see the Zamar and you're looking in the BDB dictionary, where it's going to mean three different things relating to the song. It's going to mean to sing, to play musical instruments, and to dance. So when you think about the root of this word Zamar, think about all of these things. Okay, and also it does mean to pluck. But this is what I want you to think about. When I say singing, it means all of this, including instruments and dancing. Now I'm going to be going from topic to topic, and I'm going to fold it all in together at the very end. Now, when this mark, and it does mean mark or sign, that is put upon the foreheads, which is Jehovah's name, the mark seems to be bringing in something more. When you look at Jastro's dictionary, it actually also means a musical note or musical score, right? So this seems to bring an indication that there's going to be this miraculous music that's coming with them, that they will miraculously know the song of the 144,000. They will know how to sing it. They will have the voice. They will have the dance. They will have all that they need to do this God singing. And this is what it is. This is God singing. Now, like I said, when I was in my e-course, we were looking at a few verses, such as in Exodus 15:2, which is the first time you see this very archaic song with an archaic structure of this word for Zamar. The root of that is Mar. But it's here, it is a Zimrat. The Zimrat, it is the power of God, or it is the song of God. And so you have to make a decision. Is this the power of God, or is it the song of God? And so when my instructor, he mentioned this word, he says that he believes that this is the power of God in the song. So here it says, the Yehovah is my strength and my song of God, and he has become my salvation. And so then you'll see this quoted again in Isaiah 12:2 and also Amos 5:23. So now we know that there's this God singing, right? And this God singing, where it's either the song of God, the God singing, the power of God, it seems to be all tangled up and intertwined together. Now, the one person that we know who was a God singer, well, he was King David. He was a God singer. Now, this is coming directly out of 1 Samuel 16. And it says, and one of Saul's servants answered and said, look, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who, number one, he knows how to play. 2, a brave one. 3, he's a man of war. 4, he's skilled in words. 5, he's a handsome man. And 6, Jehovah is with him. Now, this should give you an idea of what a God singer looks like. These are people who are going to know these things. These are people that their singing is part of the war, such as, I believe, the Song of the Sea and the Song of Deborah, which are very archaic songs. They're war songs, right? These will be war singers, just like David was. Remember when King Saul, he was tormented by the evil spirits that were sent to King Saul to torment him by Jehovah, and David was looked out to find because of those skills, those 6 qualifications that he had in order to play for King Saul that would drive the demons away. This is what God's singing looks like. It drives the demons away. So let's look at 1 Samuel 16:23.
I would say David probably was the best player in all the land for the king of Israel to call him to come and play music for him. I mean, that seems like, you're going to get the best of the best, right? For the king.
Absolutely. You're going to get the best of the best. I mean, they even have him, one of his qualifications that he's got to be a handsome man. So here he is, a handsome man. So now I believe this is what the 144,000 will look like. There'll be handsome people. There'll be beautiful people. There'll be people of war with their singing, perhaps. I don't know how this is going to work out, but we can see that these are people that will be uniquely skilled.
The total package.
That's a total package. Exactly right. So, and it came to be, whenever the evil spirit from Elohim was upon Saul, that David would take a lyre and play it with his hand. Then Saul would become refreshed and well, and the evil spirit would leave him. That's what God's singing is all about. Now let's look at 2 Samuel 23, verse 1. And these are the last words of David, the saying of David, son of Jesse, the saying of the man raised above, the anointed of Elohim of Jacob, and the God singer of Israel. So this is a God singer. It is Amity wrote, of Israel. So he was a God singer. The root of that word is Amar. He was the God singer of Israel.
Wow.
And it's like, and so he was chosen to give this God singing. Now, let me just propose this to you. David knew the gift he was given. David knew this was a unique gift. And David also knew that there would be God singers coming in the future. So this is what I'm proposing, is that what you see here in David is what you will see similar to the 144,000.
Yeah, what I want to do now is I want to just get into the prophecy that Zechariah prophesied on the 8th day of John's at John the Baptist's circumcision, on his eighth day circumcision. So we see here in Luke chapter 1 from verses 67 to 80. Just want to read through that. And his father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Ghost and prophesied, saying, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people, and hath raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers, and to remember his holy covenant, the oath which he swore unto our father Abraham, that he would grant unto us, this is now the oath, that he would grant unto us, that we, being delivered out of the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. And thou, child, shalt be called the prophet of the highest, for thou shalt go before the face of the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation to his people, by the remission of their sins, through the tender mercy of our Lord, of our God, whereby the day spring from on high hath visited us, to give light on them that sit in the darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet in the way of peace. And the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, and was in the deserts till the day of his showing unto Israel. So when we understand that there's a couple of things here that clearly didn't happen in John's day. There was no visiting and redemption at that point in time. Okay, so this was not a prophecy so much for the day when John was circumcised, but for a day still to come. So we see these things, these connections, and we need to understand that if this prophecy that Zechariah was referring to, this oath that the Lord made to Abraham, we need to understand what it is. Okay, and so that I believe is, well, that's not mentioned here. There's a clear connection to the promise that, and I believe it is this one here, that because this is in Genesis 22, this was the whole story where Abraham had to sacrifice Isaac. Okay, and so he had done that, and the Lord had stopped him. And then the Lord goes on and he says to Abraham, and he said, and the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of the heaven a second time and said, by myself I have sworn, saith the Lord, because thou hast done this thing, and that's the act of faith, okay, and hath not withheld thy son, thy only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed, as the stars of heaven, and as the sand which is upon the sea shore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. Thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. In other words, they will overcome the power of the enemies. They'll take charge of their enemies, okay? And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. This was the promise. This was the promise of mercy that Zechariah was referring to. So yes, there's a speaking of the seed, that Jesus himself, this Messiah, but he's also speaking about a group that would be a blessing to all the nations. Okay, that would take possession of the gate of the enemies. We also know that this promise, this whole event, that took place where Abraham had to was told to sacrifice Isaac. This event took place at the time of Passover. So this promise was also made at the time of Passover, that the seed of Abraham would overcome the enemies and would have a part to play in the overcoming of the enemies and the taking of their gate. So again, I want to make a reference to a study that I put together, and I called it the horns, the reapers, the carpenters. So yeah, the reapers, the horns, the carpenters, and so there's a connection, of course, this to John 4, where Jesus spoke about the yet 4 months, you say, is the harvest, and the field is ripe now, and then he goes on to speak about the reaping, and the reapers who receive wages, and they and so there's that connection of John 4 also to the reapers receiving wages, and the study really just goes into this prophecy of Zechariah that we just had a look at now, the horn of salvation. So really just a lot more detail, the mercy promised. Just have a look at this very briefly. You see that the blessing blessing of the tribe of Joseph that Moses spoke, of the horns that would be used to gather in his people. He says, and of Joseph he said, Deuteronomy 33:13, and of Joseph he said, blessed of the Lord be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew and for the deep that coucheth beneath, and for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon, and for the chief things of the ancient mountains, and for the precious things of the lasting hills, and for the precious things of the earth and the fullness thereof, and for the good will of him that dwell in the bush. Let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph, and upon the top of the head of him that he was separated from his brethren. His glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns like the horn of unicorns. With them shall he push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. Anyway, so yeah, for a detailed study of the horns and the carpenters and the reapers, I'd recommend take a read through the rest of the study. There's quite a lot here that I believe will strengthen your understanding concerning the role that the workers actually get to play, the role that the workers are playing in this time of the end. Okay, the next section that I want to get into is the Feast of Weeks. We know that the Feast of Weeks is a 7th Sabbath count after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which brings us to the middle of the 3rd month. And so it would be, in fact, the 16th day of the 3rd month. And what we know of Feast of Weeks is that it is Jesus' birthday, the day that Jesus was born in his first coming. And it's the covenant day. It is the day in which most of the big covenants that the Lord made with from starting with Noah and later with Abraham, with Jacob, all occurred on this particular day. It's also the day that the Mount Sinai event occurred, and that was in itself was a big covenant day. So if you go have a look at this, this is a detailed study on Covenant Day, the 15th day of the third month, and why it's an important day. So it's well worth having a look at that. Various scriptures and evidence as to why I refer to this day as Covenant Day. I believe this is the day that the bride and those that are counted worthy will be taken. It is the day of first fruits of the wheat harvest, and it is the day that the two loaves of bread baked with leaven are waved before the Lord. So the two loaves of bread, speaking of two groups, and it's also speaking of a very significant event. It's the only Feast of Weeks. Sorry, it's the only Feast of First Fruits. There are several Feasts of First Fruits. There's one for barley, which happens just after Passover, after unleavened bread. There's this one for the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And then there's another first fruits feast, which is the first fruits of the grapes that occurs in the fifth month, the 9th of the fifth month. That's a first fruits feast. And then there's the first fruits of new oil, which happens on the same day as Feast of Trumpets, or the day after Feast of Trumpets, in fact. So we've got multiple first fruits feasts, but this is the only first fruit feast where something really special happens, and that's the baking of two loaves of bread that are waved before the Lord. So for that reason and many other reasons, I believe that is the day that's marked for the taking of the bride. It's also linked to Luke chapter 2, which is the next event in the sequence of events, and Luke knowing all things in order. And it's about the 40 days of Jesus Christ. And we know that the bride is taken just prior to the 40 days of the warning of the Son of Man. So the 40 days would have taken place just after, from the middle of the third week, from the middle of the third month is when Jesus was born, and his 40 days would have occurred. That is the 40 days that's connected to his 40 days of warning, as Jonah was a warning to Nineveh. So the timing is that the Gentile bride prepared, and those accounted worthy, the first fruits of the wheat harvest will be taken at Feast of Weeks in the middle of the third month. As it stands in this year, I believe that based on the true calendar, now if we have a 13th month year this year, then which I believe is very possible, the most likely scenario, then Feast of Weeks will be on the 11th of July, around 11th of July. Let's just go to Feast of Weeks. Feast of Weeks, Jesus' birthday. Yeah, it's the 10th, and the Feast of New Grain is on the 11th of July, 16th day of the third month. So if this year is to be a 12-month year, as opposed to a 13-month year, then the Feast of First Fruits of New Grain, or Feast of Weeks, will be a month earlier. It'll be around the 11th, 12th of June. I'm just not sure whether we're supposed to see a 13-month year or a 12-month year. That'll be confirmed as we go along. So this will be a taking of a relatively small group of the bride, and then of course the those accounted worthy. And I think that this is the same group that we see in Revelations 5. The angels, what was referred to angels, Revelations 5. And I beheld and heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts and the elders. And the number of them was 10,000 and 10,000 and thousands of thousands. That, I believe, and they get to say with a loud voice, they don't get to sing a new song, but they get to say with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessings." And then we have the celebration of the whole of creation occurring at that time, and then every creature in heaven and on earth, they also celebrate at that time as well. So this is the main event that we've all been looking for, waiting to happen. I believe that we've got 4 or 5 months before that, we've got the commissioning of the worker group, and then the taking of the bride and those that are counted worthy at the Feast of Weeks on Covenant Day. And remember that this will be, remember, a marriage is also a covenant in itself. It was supposed to be the original covenant day for the marriage to the Israelites when they were in the wilderness. where the Lord entered into a covenant. It was a marriage covenant that he entered in with him, and Moses went up for 40 days to receive the terms and the detail with regards to that covenant. And in the meantime, the Israelites broke their marriage covenant by worshipping the golden calf and committing idolatry. So once again, we will see on the same day the Mount Sinai story happened in the middle of the third month. We will see the marriage to the Gentile bride taking place in the middle of the third month. I just want to make some connections and complete the picture with regards to the events in Revelations 14. In Revelations 14, we've already spoken about this group of 144,000 that gets to stand on Mount Zion, the Lamb. That is the worker group, probably taking place now in this middle of the 11th month. And then we've got them working, and you'll see things happening here that during this time, during this 5-month gap between the commissioning of the worker group and the taking of the bride, we'll see that Babylon is fallen. Babylon falls. Now, I believe that this Babylon that's fallen is the USA. It could be other things as well, but the point is, we'll understand more clearly. It is a great city. I believe that something dramatic happens to the USA during this time, after the workers are commissioned. So an angel goes out saying Babylon is fallen, and I did a bit of this study. I just want to make a quick reference to that. This one here, Babylon is fallen, and I'll go into some detail as to why I believe that the US is that Babylon. So have a look at that. Then we see that in that same time, there's another angel goes out. Sorry, I missed an angel. There's one that went out. The first angel goes out having the everlasting gospel to preach unto. And so this is the part of the work of the workers, is to take out the everlasting gospel to them that dwell on the earth. And this will also be part of the preparation for the bride and those that will be accounted worthy. And it's all around the world, to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. So the work of probably the main function of the 140 of the workers will be to take out the everlasting gospel. Then there's of course the that I just mentioned now, the Babylon that's fallen, an event. And then there's a third angel that goes out, and there's a warning that if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark on his forehead or in his hand, then he shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. Okay, that's so that's the warning of not to take the mark of the beast, not to worship the beast. Now, you see, this is the thing. This warning must go out before the beast comes on the scene, before the mark comes on the scene. Otherwise, it's pointless. And so this all begins to make sense, that when you read the Revelations in order, that Revelations 14 comes before Revelations 13, which is all about the beast. There's the first beast and the second beast coming on the scene. But before they come on the scene, because remember the order is 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. Okay? So Revelations 14, the warning goes out, and that's also part of the job of the worker group. And then we see that they also, and there's a final thing here that it is written here, the blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from hence forth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their work do follow them. So this is the workers. Some of them will be put to death in this time period before the harvest of the bride. I believe that this is also connected to Luke 21, where he says, so we can go and see that, Luke 21, and he said there will be persecution. But before all these, so before the nation against nation and before the tribulation, he said, before these they shall lay their hands on you, then persecute you, delivering you up into synagogues, that's courts. In those days, judgment was, the courts were at the synagogues, into prisons, being brought before kings, rulers, for my name's sake, and it shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what you shall answer. I will give you a mouth of wisdom, that which your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kingfolks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. There we have it. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but there shall not a hair of your head perish, for in your patience possess your souls. So there's the persecution of the worker group, which happens before the tribulation, before nation against nation, this person. And that's, I believe, will happen in this time period. In this time period between between the commission and during the first, second, and half. So during the final 12th month of the previous year, leading up to the taking of the bride, that's when those events will take place. Once the bride is taken and the 40 days begin, so that would mean that if the bride is taken at around about here, then the 40 days begins after the wedding. So we've got this time of the wedding, bride being taken and the wedding. So from around the 23rd, 24th of the third month, around about 19th of July, that's when the 40 days warning of the Son of Man will begin, and that will continue until somewhere late in August, just before the first fruits of new wine, Feast of Weeks, new wine, and that's when the grapes are beginning to get ripe, and they will start to harvest. And this, I believe, this will be the first attack on Jerusalem. This will be the Ezekiel 9 event. The marking of the 144,000 of Revelation 7 will happen just before this, and then we've got this event taking place here. So you will notice that up until now, we've typically taught that the first attack happens before the 40 days. I believe that is incorrect. The 40 days warning happens before the first attack and before the second attack, which will take place at Feast of Trumpets. So we've got the taking of the bride, Feast of Weeks, the 40 days warning, the marking of the 144,000, and then the attack on Jerusalem, the Ezekiel 9 event taking place. This will happen from the 9th of the 5th month onwards, and just like all, this has always been a really bad day. This was the destruction of the first temple and the second temple took place. This will be a really, really bad time for Jerusalem. Again, for the third time. And now I just want to take you back to Revelations 14. Because I'll show you that we've got the two harvests in Revelations 14. Sorry, Revelations 14. We've got the 144,000 that's happened, then we've got the messages that go out, and then we've got two harvests that take place. The first harvest, this is after the messages have gone out and some of the persecution of the workers take place. Then we've got, at the middle of the third month, we've got a harvest taking place. This is the first fruits of the wheat harvest that takes place, and the Son of Man does it. So John writes 14:14, and isn't that interesting? And I looked, and behold, a white cloud. And upon the cloud, that's of course Mount Zion, and upon the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. Or this word could also be translated dry. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in the sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. So we see that there's the Son of Man sitting on a cloud, that's Mount Zion. Here's the 144,000 sitting on the cloud, Mount Zion. And he now gets the go-ahead to take his bride and children. Hosea 1. Connection. We know that Hosea has got 14 chapters, and we know that Hosea's got 14 chapters which line up to the 14 years of tribulation, and the events that are mentioned in chapter 1 are related to the first year. And we see Hosea 1:2, in the beginning the word of the Lord by Hosea, and the Lord said to Hosea, this is OC, this is Jesus, before he's renamed Joshua. This is just like Joshua was renamed, his name was OC, Joshua of Moses. His original name was OC. So he said unto OC, or Hosea, go take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredoms and departing from the Lord. So there we see the same theme that's in Ezekiel 9, the great iniquity that they've committed, the great whoredoms that's taking place. And he says, yeah, go take a wife of whoredoms. This is a Gentile bride, Gentile wife, and the children. Those are counted worthy that are taken in the first year. We are in the first year of the next 7-year cycle. So the tribulation hasn't started yet, but we are in the first year of the harvest cycle. Harvesting is allowed in the first year. This is something that I've been concerned about for some time. I mentioned it a number of times last year that I was concerned that we were in the seventh year and that harvest would not take place. Now we are finally out of that seventh year, Sabbath year, and harvesting can take place. We are in the first year. Harvesting is now allowed, and the Son of Man, Revelations 14, will do that harvest. There he does the harvest. And then we have a second harvest, because there it goes on to say that another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, and had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry unto him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, that's Jerusalem, and blood came out of the winepress even unto the horse's bridle by the space of 1,600 furlongs. That there is the harvest of the first fruits of the grape harvest, which happens when? In the beginning of the 5th month. So that's why I'm saying, after the 40 days warning, so we've got the bride taken here at Feast of Weeks, 40 days warning, and then, or first the wedding for a week, then the 40 days warning, which brings us to within 3 days of also of the first Feast of Weeks, new wine, the first fruits of the grape harvest, the 9th of Av, and so this is when the grapes will be taken. This is when that Revelations 14 second harvest of the grapes, that grape harvest will take place by the other angel with a sharp sickle, much bloodshed. This is the Ezekiel 9 event. So we see that Revelation 14 events will be fulfilled right from the beginning, in order. The workers taken, workers working, harvest of the bride and those accounted worthy, and then 50 days later or so, the harvest of the first grapes, the crushing, the wine press, the crushing of the grapes in the wine press. So I think we can see that the sequence of events for Revelation 14 is actually perfect. After that, then comes the rise of the first and second beast, and all the things that they do, and then only then comes the events at the end of seals, where the woman's about to give birth, and there's 2 children here, and one is the Son of Man returning, and the other one is the child that's caught up, that's raptured. And then we've also got Satan thrown down. This is giving us a synopsis of the events at the end of seals, going into trumpets. Yeah, so we had this is the sequence of events. I don't want to go into any further detail of that. I've covered that in some of the other videos that I've already mentioned. But for now, I think I do believe that this is the correct sequence of events. Just by the way, what we will have, let me just go back to that calendar. After this crushing here, after this really bad event in Jerusalem, then we've got another 50-day count before the second attack, and I do believe that this will be a time when they will say peace and safety, peace and security. This will be the time when they will issue the decree. The modern day Cyrus will issue the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, and that will be the trigger of the 15 years that is described in Daniel's chapter, Daniel 70 weeks. When you read it in terms of 70 years, go and see that video that I mentioned earlier. Then you will see that there's 15 years. Daniel speaks of 15 years because he includes the beginning bit that's pre-tribulation, and he includes the end bit that's post the tribulation. So it's a total of 15 years. And yeah, we will see the 40 days when they will say peace and security, peace and security, peace and safety, and then sudden destruction comes upon the whole world. So that's when I believe they'll be saying that, the decree and the peace and safety, and this will also be the time when I believe many, once they see this happening in Jerusalem, I believe this at this time, Son of Man is come and gone. What they rejected, the Son of Man, they rejected as an Antichrist. They rejected him as the Dajjal, and then all of a sudden he's gone, and now Antichrist is there. The person that they called Antichrist is not there anymore, and the Jerusalem is attacked, and some of the things are starting to fall in place. And I think at this point, a lot of people are going to realize that they missed the first group. They missed the pre-trib rapture. There will be a lot of perplexity. A lot of questions will be asked, and this is probably when most people will watch videos like this one that I'm doing right now to try and get an understanding of things. So from there, of course, we know that that's the beginning of the tribulation. The actual beginning will be the second attack on Israel. This is when now they lose the land completely. The first one was mainly on Jerusalem. They're still in the land to a large extent and saying rebuild, etc. And let's have peace and safety, peace and security. But then there's the attack from Ishmael, the Arabs, the attack from the north, the final attack. And they now, after this, they will no longer be in control. And the Gentiles from this point onwards will trample over Jerusalem, and Israel will be controlled by the Gentiles for the next 6.5 years, 2,300 days of Daniel. And this will be the time of the seals when so the red horse rider, the black horse, the pale horse will be going out. The fifth seal, the martyring. The sixth seal, when Mount Zion comes, the great destruction happening. They hide themselves under the rocks for fear of what they're seeing. Great turmoil. The marking, the beginning of the work of the 144,000, and then of course the great multitude rapture, which we see in Revelation 7. The great multitude, after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude that no man could number, from all nations, kindred, and people, and tongues, and stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in the hands. So we get to see this. This is now at the end, and just prior to the beginning of trumpets. So going in order. 8 is the final seventh seal and the beginning of trumpets, and then 9 is most of the trumpets happening, and then 10 is when it's the end of trumpets and the wrapping up where Jesus returns. Then you remember 11, you've got to read 14, 13, 12, and 11. So 11 is happening together with 9. So at the time of trumpets, you got the two witnesses, and 12 happens before that. So we've already been through all of those things. So you've got to jump to 15. The plagues, that comes after the trumpets. 7 bowls. And then, of course, the judgment of the great prostitute. The mystery Babylon, the judgment. Okay, these two are special verses. They're not necessarily, don't have to necessarily there. I think 18 is definitely part of the fall of Babylon in Revelation 14. For Revelation 14, Babylon has fallen, Babylon has fallen. That's the fall described in Revelation 18, the detail of it. Okay. And then, of course, the rejoicing in heaven and the marriage supper of the Lamb. This is now would be the marriage of the bride that was taken in now at the Feast of New Trees, now in the middle of the 11th month. That covenant that was entered into in the middle of the 11th month, the very day that Adam and Eve, I believe, were booted out. I didn't mention that earlier. But there's evidence in the Apocrypha books, the book of Adam and Eve, if you understand it correctly, there's evidence there that Adam and Eve were actually booted out of the Eden in the middle of the 11th month. So that you can have a read through that. There's also a video associated with that. I'll just show you which one it is. Sorry. It is... yeah, this one, yeah. The Fall of Man, the original Black Friday. There you can see the detail of that particular study, where I believe that it's clear that Adam and Eve were booted out of Eden in the middle of the 11th month. So all of these connections, and it just makes it appropriate for these things to all be starting in the middle of the 11th month. So just to wrap that up, we see that based on the Aries speaker, which has got the 13th month, extra 13th month this year, which means a late start for the year, a late start 22nd of April, as opposed to the end of March. We're looking at end of April rather for a later start, which means that the tribulation starts 22 October 2025 in full swing. It could be a month earlier if we're working on the Hebrew calendar, then it will be in this vicinity, 23 September. 23 September. If I just go, let me just go to that Pisces calendar. Pisces 2025. Pisces calendar, which is in line with the Hebrew calendar. I think they have their 23 September. So that's possible. I mean, we know that 923 is a big number for them as well. It was also marked, 23 September was marked in 2017. So as I say, I'm not sure whether the Lord is going to work on the according to the Hebrew calendar dates, in which case the bride will be taken around the 11th of June, or if he's working on a year that has an extra month in it, and we have to, and the bride is only taken on 11th of July, and then the first attack would happen on 3 August as the early date, or 1 September, if there's an extra 13th month in this year that shifts, makes next year a late start. So yeah, those are the main dates. So if we go by the Hebrew, we're looking at 11 June, 3 August, and 23 September would be the 3 main event dates. And if we're looking at a extra 13th month in this calendar, and everything gets shifted out by a month, then we're looking at 11 July, 1 September for the first attack, and 22 October for the final attack and beginning of tribulation. I'm waiting for confirmation on that. I'll only know. And the worker group will certainly, I think if the worker group, if I'm correct, that this worker group is commissioned now in the middle of the 11th month, between the 6th and the 14th of February, somewhere around there, either one or the other, either at his birth or his 8th day circumcision, I'm not sure. I'm fairly certain that the worker group will know exactly which the calendar will have been sorted out for them. They'll know the true calendar by then. So, but until then, we just wait and see. Keeps the enemy guessing as well, I guess. Let's understand that the enemy doesn't understand. Just like we're trying to figure things out, they are trying to figure it out as well. And if they'd known the date, they would have done things to make it much more difficult. And they're doing their damnedest to make it as difficult as possible. You must remember, I will just conclude on this. The enemy knows about this reaper group, knows about this worker group. That's why they've made such an evil thing of this term reapers. Just search the word reaper on the internet, and you'll see how it's how Satan has really made that whole concept of being a reaper an absolute evil thing, because he understands that worker group that's coming, the reapers, the horns, the carpenters, they are going to be the enemy number one. They are going to squash their heads. They just like the seed of the woman that's going to squash the head of the serpent is the worker group. Jesus, of course, as well, but the worker group with him. And he knows it. And he will do everything in his power to try and eliminate them as quickly as possible in these next couple of months leading up to the taking of the bride. Anyway, guys, I hope this blesses you, and maybe by the time you watch this video, more events will have happened and we'll have more clarity on the thing. I just put it out to you. That's the way I see it at the moment, and I trust that this will bless you, and the Lord bless you and keep you, and we'll see you guys soon, hopefully in third heaven, and if not, then certainly on Mount Zion, and if not, then well, we'll do our best to survive through the tribulation, but I do believe we'll see you there. Good night.